Gonna start here. Welcome everybody to the final Sunday of 2020. Thank goodness.
Yay.
Welcome to Contemporary Issues class.
Right. Pop the cork.
Off the court. Glad to leave it behind. We're gonna talk today about do a review of the events of 2020, kind of chronologically, and the lessons that people say we should be learning from this crazy year. And next week, Ron Puning is going to start a two-part presentation on racial issues, the Mississippi burning incident in Mississippi. And will be really a good two-parter. So we will look forward to that. Okay, announcements as usual. Lower left corner is your mute button. If you're not muted, please go ahead and click that so we can keep the background noise down. And we are recording this for future playback. And let's see what else. Vicky is going to tell us about the reverse Advent food donation.
Yes.
Roger.
Good morning, everybody. If you did it, we've done it, and it's over. And I know I have a laundry basket that is overwhelmingly heavy that I'm going to have help with to get it in the car and out of the car. But I have been in communication with Sarah Davis at the church, who has in turn been in contact with Jen Kleppel. And we will drop off tomorrow between 10 and 2 at the church. There are tables that are typically set up out front. So all you do is just drop your stuff up there. I would ask that you label your food, Contemporary Issues class, Reverse Advent, and then R.E. Jen Kleppel. So, because she knows how she's going to distribute that. I have several checks inside my basket that have not been turned in yet. So those of you that have written checks and are wondering, that's where they are, but they will be turned in tomorrow so that our class will get, I don't know, I don't think there's credit, but anyway, it'll go in as a combined contribution.
Crowns in heaven.
Yeah. Maybe we'll have a big classroom up there. Yeah. Anyway, thanks again to all of you that did this. I feel like it was a very worthwhile project. It really made me mindful of how easy it is for me to just go to my pantry and pick out something that I want to fix for dinner when there's people that don't even have a pantry, so thanks for being so aware of those outside our circle that have so much less than we have. And hopefully we'll be able to do some other projects throughout the year, like this, that will be helpful, so thanks again. And like I said, 10 to 2 drop off, label it Contemporary Issues class with R.E. Jen Kleppel, and checks will be turned in tomorrow. Does anybody need a pickup? Does anybody need their stuff picked up? Okay, if you do, just contact me by email and I'll be glad to come by tomorrow and pick up whoever needs a pickup. So thanks again, everybody. And we'll be looking, Alice and I'll get our heads together and look for some more good projects. And it just feels good to be able to do this, even though we can't see each other. It's fun to know that we're helping those that are less fortunate than us. Thanks again. Happy New Year. I gotta go watch. I'm going to watch the Chiefs game, so I might not be here for the whole thing. Go Chiefs.
I have something I'd like to say. I don't know if any of you know Jen and Linda Rustig. She is in my sister's group on Wednesday mornings. He had a heart attack on Christmas morning, and he's having surgery tomorrow morning. So keep Jen and Linda Rustig and their whole family in your prayers. Because of COVID, she can't be there with them.
Oh, my.
And there's all sorts of
I'll do right back
family
and see
that
their
can't
face.
travel. And so, yeah, Jim Lustig.
Rustic, like R-U-S?
No, no.
Lustig. It starts with an L.
Oh, Lustig.
Lus-
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. All right.
I know
Thanks,
them from
Alice.
Church. Any other
Uh,
joys and concerns? Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I have a concern and I don't want to in any way diminish the importance of the food collections over the Advent period of time. But I've been delivering food that's been donated to the church for quite a while. Once a month, I would take it. And I don't know whether you people, whether everybody knows this, but we weigh all the food before we take it to the recipient, to the food pantry that gets it. And an average, we would get somewhere between, I would deliver between 200, well, say 100 and 250 pounds of food. Now, typically at Christmas time, it would triple that. And as a matter of fact, last year, I had two weeks in December that the donations got over 700 pounds.
Wow.
So it was always a super abundant time. However, the contrary, and what I want to talk about is the fact that we're coming into the dark time.
Mhm.
And although it was always so abundant at Christmas time, into January, February, March, and April, sometimes it would fall down to 50 pounds, maybe even
Oh, wow.
less than that. The desperation is unique this year. If you could continue to donate food, it would be absolutely loved that we would continue with any kind of an ongoing stream of food, because this is really going to be a very, very tough year. On the other side of the fence, I was talking to Larry Martinez at the Denver Inner City Parish, and their food distribution was running somewhere between 700 people and 900 people every month. They've been up to 3,000 people during this pandemic that they have been delivering. And in addition, they cannot allow people to come into the food pantry. So they've been making up food boxes and delivering them to people all in their catchment area. And up to 3,000 people every month are being fed by this one small food bank, this one small food pantry. Some of the big ones are up to 20,000, 30,000 people every single year.
Man.
The need is absolutely acute, and the fact that we are going into the dark months is really important that we not lose sight of this.
Well-
Are
perishables,
requested? Like
I'm
milk, when you give people cereal, but you know, they need some milk with it.
Powder.
Do they want milk?
Oh, non-perishable foods are absolutely essential. No perishables, because sometimes you don't know how long it's going to be on the shelves. You're right, they do need milk. If you're going to donate milk, donate dried milk that they can mix up. But it should be canned goods or some type of stuff in boxes or something like that, but no perishable.
Let's have Jim and Vicky coordinate for our class on that. That would
Yeah,
be great.
Jim, I'd be glad to help you, coordinate with our class, I wouldn't mind doing this all over again,
Well, I think we should, if we can continue the effort, and I don't know exactly the logistics or anything. They have a table out there every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 10 o'clock until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's marked very clearly right out in the front of the church,
11 to
food donations. The other desperate need is for diapers.
Yeah.
The diaper drives, we've always done such a great job of donating diapers at St. Andrew. But I understand the diaper collection is just dropped, fallen off a cliff.
Okay, good.
Okay. Okay.
We'll follow up with that. Good. Okay, go ahead, Ann.
Anything you want to do, Vicky, I'll be glad to work with you.
Okay, I'll get a hold of you.
Okay.
Alice, you and I can kind of work with him.
Okay. And Ann, go ahead for a second, please. We need to start a presentation too.
People, IFCS would much prefer that you just send them a check. They know how to buy the things that they need in bulk and quantity and can get much better prices. And it's much more efficient for them to get the food directly rather than us to buy it at the store, send it to St. Andrew, and then to transport it. I don't know how the other food banks work, but I have talked over the years to quite a few different people that work at IFCS. Just recently at Christmas when I brought some donations from our United Methodist Women group. And so just think about writing the check because they know what they need and we don't always know what their needs are. It's a lot easier.
Great idea.
Maybe we could do something different and interesting, like maybe January do a check, February do the food, just kind of make it interesting for us too. So we'll talk and then get back with you next Sunday.
Okay, great. Important for us to help out that way too. Okay, Vicky, don't knock over the computer. Okay, everybody. I will start to share screen here, and I'm just going to present some slides in order chronologically by month and do kind of a quick review of 2020, and then we'll talk about the lessons that came out of it. Can you see the screen okay?
Yeah. Yes.
Everybody can? Good. Okay. Well, as I go through these slides, if you have a comment about this event, go ahead, please. We'll just be informal and make a brief comment, but we'll save most of our discussion for after the slides. But please do feel free to jump in and comment briefly as we do this. Okay, January kicked off with some of the worst wildfires in Australia's history in the first week of January due to drought and high winds that destroyed over 46 million acres, roughly the size of the country of Syria. At least 3,500 homes were lost, 34 people died, and probably millions of wildlife. You may remember that. I certainly remember the pictures of people holding the burned animals. It really got your heart at that point. So that was a bad way to start the year. Then on January 9th, the World Health Organization announced for the first time the unusual pneumonia that was showing up in Wuhan, China. We had, of course, seen pictures like this of people wearing masks in China and throughout Asia for a long time. But this was the first announcement about the pneumonia that showed up in China. Just a little interesting thing I found too about people, speaking of Asians wearing masks in previous years, story says that throughout Asia, masks have been worn for cultural and environmental reasons since at least the 1950s. Japanese people wear masks when feeling sick as a courtesy to stop any sneezes from landing on other people. Japanese women wear masks on their faces when they don't have time to put on makeup. And motorcycle riders wear masks to deflect vehicular exhaust in heavy traffic. Masks became even more a regular part of the scene in 2002 when the SARS outbreak happened. It was a turning point for Asia. Chinese youth also wear masks to avoid being approached by people they don't want to talk to. And others do it to hide their identities. They add sunglasses and sun hats when they don't want to be recognized or talk to other people on the street. So just a little history of Asian culture. Has anybody been to Asia and seen that kind of cultural practice?
I was there a year ago, June, and I saw almost everyone with masks back then. The June before January, yeah.
Uh-huh. On January 20th, the CDC said that 3 US airports must begin screening for coronavirus. And these airports were picked because of their flights directly from Wuhan to the United States. January 21st, the first US case was confirmed in Washington State. I remember that too. People wondering when it would get here. And that showed up in the Seattle area. On January 23rd, Wuhan was put under quarantine after 13 people died in 2 days and 300 were sickened. China took the unprecedented move not only to close off Wuhan's 11 million people, but also restricted protocol for area cities around there. And then on January 31st, WHO, World Health Organization, issued a global health emergency, alerting countries around the world that they expected this was going to become a pandemic. And of course, in January, the impeachment trial of Donald Trump began after a House inquiry alleged he had solicited foreign help and interference in the 2020 election, and then obstructed the inquiry by telling his administration officials to ignore subpoenas and documents. So we remember that at the same time. That was more of a big story in January than really we were even thinking about the coronavirus. Next, I've got a lot of people's interest. Well, first there was a Ukraine-bound airplane shot down after taking off from the Tehran airport. I think a lot of us probably remember that too, because the government denied it was their fault, and then they turned around days later and admitted it. But Prince Harry and Meghan Markle announced their intention to step down from the royal family. There was a big story there. The crisis finally ended after a royal summit meeting with Queen Elizabeth, in which they worked things out and they got their roles all figured out to some degree anyway. And in sports, Major League Baseball was rocked by scandal when the Houston Astros engaged in an elaborate multi-year cheating scheme, which critics charged enabled the team to win the 2017 World Series. That would have been even a bigger story on other years, for sure. In February, global air travel was restricted from China. February 3rd, the US declared public health emergency due to the coronavirus. The announcement came 3 days after the WHO declared a world health emergency. At the same time in Washington, it was gripped by the US Senate's historic impeachment trial of President Trump, and the Democratic prosecutors arguing that Trump illegally pressured Ukrainian leaders to benefit himself. In the midst of the drama, Trump delivered his State of the Union address, an awkward affair where Speaker Nancy Pelosi refused to call introducing him a high privilege and distinct honor, which was usually done. Trump refused to shake Pelosi's hand. We may remember that. And then Pelosi tore up a copy of Trump's speech when he was done on live TV. Does everybody remember that like I do? Just the,
Yeah.
just the
I do,
visuals
yeah.
of that. Yeah. That
That's
was a
when
lot.
she clapped back at him. Remember her
Did they
clapping
what?
back? Is that when
Yes.
the clapping?
The clapping, yes.
Mm.
Oh, but then in late February, finally the Senate, the charges of impeachment went to the Senate. And of course, on a party line vote, the Republican majority in the Senate voted to acquit Trump of the charges. So that was one that was drug out, and we certainly remember that. Then also in late February was the incident which this young man, Ahmaud Arbery, was fatally shot while jogging in a neighborhood in Georgia. 3 white civilians followed him in their truck, got into an altercation with him, and he was killed. Was really the big first incident of this year that started the racial issue becoming high profile. Harvey Weinstein was also convicted on multiple charges of sexual abuse in late February, culminating a long story of his and the Me Too movement incidents, issues. And then the presidential primaries were in full swing, with Bernie Sanders at that point emerging as the clear front runner. A new challenger emerged at that time also, Michael Bloomberg, the billionaire, used his personal fortune to hire a vast army of consultants to supply him with focus groups, jokes, and very strange political tactics. Nevertheless, he struggled in the debates. You may remember Bloomberg in the debates, and the low point coming when Elizabeth Warren, during a heated exchange about Bloomberg's non-disclosure agreements, brought his efforts to a quick end. He soon withdrew. And then Joe Biden won the South Carolina primary after getting an endorsement from South Carolina Black officials, and really helped to start the momentum that he needed to get the nomination. Let's see, I had one out of sync there, so I'm going to go right to this. Okay, in March, we really, of course, remember that's when the lockdown began. People started asking questions about quarantines and what would this pandemic mean. Lockdowns began in many countries around the world, triggering the global economic reaction that made the Dow Jones Industrial Average have the single worst day. And then I had a note from the humor columnist Dave Barry, who tried to sum up the confusion of early March. He said, first, authorities still seem to be saying that this was basically the flu and there was no reason to panic. But all of a sudden, there seemed to be no hand sanitizer for sale anywhere, or toilet paper, or paper towels, as if people plan to be in the bathroom for weeks. Then we learned that Tom Hanks had the coronavirus, and we asked, what did that mean? And Tom Hanks said it was a lot worse than the flu, and we needed to wash our hands and start wearing masks. But then we heard from the officials, some officials, that masks were effective and others that it was not effective. So we didn't know what to believe at that point in March. On March 13th, Trump declared it is a COVID-19 national emergency, which unlocked billions of dollars in federal funding. And then on March 13, there was the travel ban for non-US citizens traveling from Europe. So they started trying to figure out how that would come to pass. April, and as we got into April, first thing in April was the deadliest mass shooting in Canada's history, in Nova Scotia, Canada. 22 people were killed across 16 locations, and it raised the issue of gun ownership and gun control in Canada as well as the US, which we had not heard for some months, but it raised its head again then. And then back in April also, of course, was the lockdown. New York was hit the hardest by the cases of COVID-19. Pandemic had a disproportionate effect on communities of Blacks, Asians, and Latinos. And then we jumped to May when the racial issues started. George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis after a police officer came to a convenience store to respond to a complaint about a passing of a counterfeit $20 bill. George Floyd, seen here, did not resist arrest, but he did resist going into the back of a police car, which may have been what caused him to be put on the ground. And then the famous scene of the police officer with his knee on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, with Floyd saying, "I cannot breathe," and then finally crying and asking for his mother, which touched many people and was shown around the world by video.
Steve,
Yes, go ahead, Jim.
one thing that I have noticed in the media, and I don't know whether other people have noticed this or not, but you just used the term was killed. I've noticed that there is an awful lot of media personalities that are not expressing it that way. They're saying that George Floyd died and that the other victims died in that month or something like that. And there was somehow or another, the media are softening this whole experience by not saying that they were killed. And I just wanted to raise that up because it kind of bothered me when I heard it on news talks this morning when I was listening.
Even this morning. Well, that's of course a question that I dealt with as a news reporter too for years. When do you use exactly what language? Say allegedly or killed. So I think you make a good point, Jim.
You know, I think was killed means that it was an active act by something other than the nature. And it bothers me when the whole issue here is that a whole race of people are struggling to not be killed. So anyway.
It's a good point. Words matter. We do notice words. Excuse me. And of course, when the video of that went viral around the world, it started protests pretty quickly after that. And the Black Lives Matter organization and motto became at the forefront of that. That continued moving into June. This was one of the first things in June when there were protests outside. President Trump had protesters cleared away from the street in front of the White House, walked across the street to the St. John Church without permission from the church leaders and held up his Bible. This was meant to be a strong visual during the time of the protest. Trump was said to try to do that to show he was in charge. And then he soon afterwards, days afterwards, held a rally in Tulsa and went right on with the campaign. I remember also at the time that the pastor of this church was angry because Trump did not have permission to use their sign. And it made me think of our church too. How would we have felt if a government official had stood in front of our sign at St. Andrew and done that? Okay, also in June, Joe Biden was criticized for being locked up in his Delaware home, so to speak, and not really having much interest in coming out, it appeared. In New Zealand, their prime minister declared that country to be COVID-free, as they had no COVID cases at the time. And China's economy came bouncing back after a first quarter slump, which got a lot of attention, thinking that the global economic reaction would not be as bad as it eventually turned out to be. In July, rural hospitals became having a lack of unit beds. After 5 months of the pandemic was declared a national emergency in the US. 49% of low-income areas had no free beds in their intensive care units versus 3% of the wealthiest areas. Hospitals were forced to transfer the sickest patients to care facilities in wealthier areas. COVID-19 became the third leading cause of death as it kicked up. Also in June and July, the experimental vaccines, AstraZeneca and biologics, began showing their promising results. So it was even that quick that they began, after just a few months, developing the vaccines and testing them. And also in July, the Washington Redskins bowed to mounting public pressure and changed their name to I didn't have it here, I think the Washington Nationals, but the racial issues continued that time. Then we'll jump to September. Look at my notes for just a minute here. September was the first Biden and Trump debate. As we saw, it was highlighted by bitter exchanges and name calling that set off graphics on the internet that said, "Will you shut up, man?" A reference from Biden. And the unsuccessful attempts on the part of the moderator, Chris Wallace, to gain control of that first debate. It was called a win for both sides, but it was a national embarrassment, and there was a universal feeling that something had to be done. So that for the next debate, they handled things a little differently with muting the microphones of each candidate while the other was speaking. Also during September, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, setting off a major political battle over her replacement. She was also honored as being a leader for women's rights during her long career. And October, the Senate confirmed Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. It's a family picture of her family. As you may remember, she was Catholic, has 7 kids, 2 of them were adopted. She had only a few years as a judge, but a longer career as an academic, which brought both praise and questions as to her readiness to serve on the Supreme Court. And then, of course, in October 2, President Trump and the First Lady tested positive for COVID-19, in addition to more than a dozen others in the White House. This came after several events at the White House where people did not wear masks or observe social distancing. Trump went into Walter Reed Army Hospital for 3 days, got the best medical treatment available of antibody cocktails, remdesivir, and dexamethasone. He came out and declared, if you get the virus, don't let it dominate your life. Just carry on. This came after conflicting reports from his doctors and White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows about his condition. And then in November, winding down here, of course, Election Day arrived with more and more Americans voting, especially by mail, than in any other election in US history. Political experts and surveyors predicted an easy Biden win, possibly by a landslide, but it came out to be much closer than that. And of course, several days passed before a clear winner was reported, and states continued with their recounts. It was not until Saturday of that week that the news media called the election for Biden. Trump continued to claim that he won the election by a lot and that there was a vast vote fraud scheme that needed to be rectified. So he began the challenges in court for that. On November 18, the Pfizer and BioNTech vaccine was announced to be 95% effective, and distribution plans were released saying that the vaccine would happen by the end of the year. And in December, of course, this month, the first COVID vaccines were administered first in the UK, followed by the US. The rollout of the vaccine is creating a sense of optimism around the globe. And then on December 14, I believe it was, the Electoral College cast its votes and officially confirmed Joe Biden's victory. This little graphic shows the number of electoral votes in each of the states. So that was my quick review of 2020. What jumps out at you as being interesting from the progression of events? There, would anybody like to comment on the progression of events? With COVID, and then racial issues in the spring, and the election heating up in the summer and fall. Well, what I'd like to do now in our 20 minutes that are left is talk about the three categories of lessons that the experts are saying we should be paying attention to: the pandemic lessons, racial, and the election lessons. So let's talk about those in order and really get more discussion here. As I emailed to you, there's two categories of the pandemic lessons. They said one is the societal category and the other is our personal category of lessons. In the societal category, they said really a top thing that we should be taking away is how to better protect our national economy, our people, hospitals, and schools from the next pandemic. That we should be identifying the best prevention and solution systems that work and those that don't. That hospitals and schools especially are paying attention to that, they say, and preparing for next time. So with that one, what do you all see? Have you seen that? If anybody is in hospitals or schools, especially, have you been paying attention to what are the best systems to react better next time?
I've got a granddaughter who teaches kindergarten at a charter school in New York, in Brooklyn. And she's been here in Colorado working from home since before, well, it was early November. Now she's returned, excuse me, yesterday because she has to be back. They're going to start to go back to their next semester, I guess, after the holidays. But she was just dreading to discover that her school would not be going, would only be virtual, even now. It's been that way all year. And she was, instead of going back excited, because she wants to be with her kids, she's just dreading it. So she needs, support.
Does she feel like the school systems are learning from this for the next time if it happens again, Lola?
Yeah, they should.
I think so. I think they're discovering how important it is, especially lower levels, and that they need to find ways to, and especially since I think they're learning that perhaps schools are not among the major places of where COVID is transmitted. They're handling it well.
Right.
Okay. Very
Steve, there's
good.
one thing that I noticed that I think is interesting with my daughter being a nurse and in her perspective, with the people getting COVID, that as if we do have this other variant, I guess a concern of mine is the lack of willingness for people to take it serious and potentially ignore some of the things, like look at this extreme travel people did over Christmas, and the weight that it causes by people just, and I can understand it. I mean, we couldn't get together with the kids in New York and we did a Zoom Christmas, right? And it's bothersome to do that, but I just think, and I'm not criticizing, I'm saying, I think that really is an impact as we fight these variants and stuff. If we don't lock down, is a concern.
That was one of the other things I read too, that the sociologists say that we really should be paying attention to how people react to shutdowns, why some comply and others resist, and especially around the United States in different areas, north and south. Governors should be paying attention to, even for the next time, if it happens again, what the best practice should be on shutdowns.
Have you read anything about that? Because I find that interesting, why certain people don't, why they react differently. Have you read anything about that? Can you enlighten us anything about that?
Well, what I read is that this year it was certainly politicized because of Trump's approach to it, and Republicans versus Democrats. Wearing the mask became a political symbol also. So that's something to keep in mind for the future.
I think another reason, Steve, there's a gender issue there too. Women are more compliant than men, and I guess that's just the way numbers of men behave,
Yeah. And they said also north versus the south, kind of the southern attitude, rebellion, don't tell us what to do in the south, was a factor too this year, they said. Terry, go ahead.
I like here in Douglas County and even in Littleton, the charter schools seem to be able to operate being open. They're able to control what goes on in each school from a local level, where more of the public schools are a top-down run thing. And it is all has to do is where you can draw your money from and how you can spend it to control each particular school. Douglas County schools have been open through most of the time. Cherry Creek schools were open in class up to Thanksgiving. And they have a better way of controlling their funds and controlling the situations. It's all about money and where you're going to put it, where you want to spend.
Yeah, money often comes into it. Another lesson that I read was that they say we should recognize that societal practices, systems can change more quickly than we expect. The vaccine production schedule showed that when technological scientific information is shared and companies cooperate, vaccine production can be much quicker than it was in past years. We should realize that and take advantage of it in the future.
Dave,
On the personal
One
lesson
more thing
side,
about our vaccine. The technology for this virus was developed during the worldwide effort on HIV. And they used that approach and that way of solving that problem, which was done and studied worldwide. And they applied that technology to create these new virus vaccines.
I think we need a more unified plan for these future pandemics, of which there's expected to be more of them, because you can just look at recent history. We've had several of these serious diseases, and they seem to get worse. But you know, they don't. Disease doesn't recognize any state lines or borders. So I think we need a unified approach, so we don't have these pulling one way and pulling another way, and to the detriment of the people. We've seen in our own country where people were ignoring precautionary measures, thinking it was unnecessary because they weren't having a high incident of it in their state. And then eventually they're the hardest hit states, because it, you know, the disease becomes rampant in those areas too.
yeah, Jim, Dr. Fauci just last couple of days said he thought in hindsight, we should have had a national policy instead of leaving it up to the states, how to handle each of the things. Karen Alexander, did you have your hand up? Make a comment? You're muted.
No, I did not. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Flailing my hand.
That's okay. Dave, I see your finger up. Go ahead. You're muted, Dave. Dave, you're muted. Cannot hear you.
I know. On two comments. One on the schools, talking about Douglas County and Cherry Creek school districts. They're both pretty homogeneous student populations. When you get back down into Littleton and Denver, they're so heterogeneous, and resources within each house is so different that it's just a nightmare. I was reading in the Post yesterday, I think, that the person in charge of the Northeast quadrant of the Denver Public Schools was saying they're finding the resources at home are like a silo, and so tall and so various that how do you deal with that? You know, some houses have 3 or 4 computers, nice internet. Other homes don't even have a computer at home. And then, you know, George W. Bush, after 9/11, I think it was, put together a task force to develop a national playbook for these epidemics, pandemics, national tragedies. Was passed down to Obama administration. They improved it. They handed it off to Trump, and he basically threw it away. And so there has to be, as Fauci said, a national coordinated response to anything. So I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Dave.
I'd like to comment on the Littleton school system and the schools down there. Every kid is given a computer with a special account that they take home, and they do all their homework and lessons on the computer. And the teachers, when they meet them online, are following up from how they did their work on their own computer. Every kid has a computer in the Littleton school system in Cherry Creek from about the 4th grade on up.
Well, that's good. Okay, I want to mention a couple of the personal lessons that are suggested we should be learning. They range from the general ideas that this should help us be more grateful for normal times when we can meet in person with family and friends, go to theater and movies. We just shouldn't take those things for granted, obviously. To the more specific suggestions like we should use Zoom like this more often with family and friends or in meetings from people around the country. One of the good things to come out of this is that we know we have this format now and we should be using it, and probably will, for churches and other social programs more in the future than we have ever in the past. We may not have been forced into this as much without this pandemic lesson.
And one of the things about that is that if we can utilize this tool, it may cut down on some of the pollution in traveling just to and from meetings or doing other things that we can have, conferences and things like that, so that we don't have to get on an airplane and travel all the way across the country to attend a very boring conferences, et cetera.
More virtual conferences, right?
One more thing about that, we're reaching a larger audience using Zoom, including our church. People are watching us outside our area and are also contributing to our church.
Yes, and in fact, let me ask, if you don't mind, Rev Jerry, I see you are with us, Rev Jerry Butler. Have we in fact seen that, Jerry, with greater attendance in services and classes by Zoom?
I think, speaking of services, I think what we can say for positive is that we've seen a much wider reach than we have. Of course, before the pandemic, looking at y'all's numbers, there were always more people in the building. But we're getting very close to those numbers. When you look at the views, or when you look at the people that are on during the premiere on YouTube, a good coefficient is to multiply that number by like 1.7 or 1.8, and that gets you the number of viewers. So we're like, today I think we had like 500-600 logins. So, you multiply that out, that gets you a little over 1,000 people almost that are watching, from a statistical point of view. And the reach is wide. You'll see in the comments, we're really, we talked about this last week, how we're really going to try to find creative ways to ask people where they're logging in from, and actually try to reach out to these people, like with a gift or something. To let them know that we value their presence. So yeah, I think that we are. And of course, I've always been a big fan of online educational platforms. Those have been around a long time. When I took my MBA back in 2004 to 2007, all of my concentration courses were online. And they did that because they were able to get more synergy and more people in the room to justify offering more concentrations for our MBA. So that's definitely a big positive of online applications, especially in education.
Steve, I'd like to comment on your review of the year. It's not a criticism, just a comment.
Sure.
But in the Senate trial in the impeachment, it wasn't unanimously party line, because Senator Romney voted for impeachment.
Right. That's a good point. Okay, in our last 5 or 7 minutes here, let's look at the racial issues from this year, the lessons from that. The main one that I read was that sociologists say we really were using the term woke up, of course, to see the discrimination that is in police systems and court systems and societal structures in general. And then secondly, that actions need to be taken to stop those, and that they need to be continued, so that this was not just a blip that will not continue. And the third thing was the use of cell phones to record and disseminate the videos of these incidents. That was really the spark, that the catalyst that caused these things to be seen and proceed into the protest phase. So what do you think about those? Do you think it is continuing? Do you think the racial awareness and action is going to continue?
I think there's a new national awareness of the fact of the injustice against people of color. I think there's a new awareness of that. And of course, a lot of people, are doing something about it. And some of them who are racist are concerned about are having people of color in the country. They just cannot accept that. As a news person, Steve, I'd like to ask you, I think the news media in the country could do a great service towards equality if they were in their reporting, if they would stop referring to a Black American or an Asian American. It's just Joe Dokes with the white people. They don't identify him as being white, so it's just naturally racist when they mention that. So I think if they'd stop doing that, that would contribute to the melding of the population. They would be just thinking of people as another citizen rather than a citizen.
I think that's often a good idea, Jim, and I think they too should do follow-up stories, because the racial story now has dropped off to almost nothing in the national media, and I think they should be doing follow-up stories saying, here are the changes that were proposed, and here is the action that's being taken, and they should help move this story forward and make sure the changes are brought and looked at in the public eye. Terry Terwilliger, I see your hand up.
I want to say one thing. There are 50% more white persons killed by the police than there are of minorities. And the other thing of news right now, the people arrested in Aurora is down by over 35%.
As a result of the protest and the racial awareness, you think?
Well, a policeman treats
fear on the part of police.
Every criminal the same, regardless whether they're white or minorities. And to separate how you would treat one group of people versus other group of people. Like it says, there are more than 50% more white people killed across this country, including in the Denver area, than there are minorities. But right now, Black Lives Matter, and it's a moment in history where they have the attention.
Well, I guess I would challenge that a little bit. And I would say maybe those numbers are a bit skewed, because when you have more of a certain race, there's always going to be more of a percentage. I mean, you can say 50% more are white, but that's just because there's more white people. What you have to do is you have to contextualize that with coefficients and compare apples to apples. I think that and I'm just going to say this, okay, I don't think it's any surprise, that racism has been around a long time. And the only thing that's happened this year is we've just been made more aware of it. Black lives have always mattered, and Black lives have never mattered to a lot of people. And now with this awareness, we're coming into this. I think it's hard to compare. I think there's some value in pointing out racial distinctions whenever they highlight injustices.
Yeah, I agree.
We don't need to homogenize this issue by just calling people human. The fact of the matter is Black people and people of color have been dehumanized for a really, really long time. And it's time to pay the piper. It's time to recognize this and to recognize our role in it. And be honest with ourselves. That's just my opinion. I'm not downgrading.
I agree.
But I do think we have to be very careful with statistics.
And I also think that important that we own this problem ourselves a little bit. Martin Luther King said that the 10 o'clock hour on Sunday morning was the most racially segregated hour in American social life. And I'm looking at the screen right now, I see no faces of other than white looking back at me. We're part of the problem. We're not part of the solution yet. When we incorporate people of color into our congregation and they truly become our brothers and sisters, the way all of you are, then we're going to be a lot more receptive to listening to these problems.
Complicated issues. Okay, we're gonna take a few more minutes to wrap up, but go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, very quickly, your homework for next week is to watch the movie Mississippi Burning, starring Gene Hackman and William Dafoe. And then I wanted to comment, if I had made the cover for Time Magazine this year, I would have called it the Year of the Amygdala, or sung a song, Mr. Spock, where are you when we needed you? Because between all the things I saw in terms of America's response to the pandemic, the impeachment trial, the forest fires, the opposition to vaccinations, I saw again the emotion overpower facts. So I was incredibly disappointed, but not terribly surprised. I'm finishing up the great course on Roman history, and the Roman orator Cicero said that emotion wins over logic, and that was true 2,000 years ago. And I'm sorry to report it's still applied this year. So.
Okay. Easy homework to watch a movie. Okay, final thoughts, folks. Any final comments?
Well, I'm never referred to as a white American. I'm just a white person. I'm just a person. But I almost always say a Black African, a Black American. They attach that stigma or whatever it is to their name more so than just plain white people. I'm just a person. I'm just a citizen. I'm not particularly a white American or a Black American or anything. I'm just plain, they make a difference between us. Can't do that.
It's perception of others. You are seen as white. You may not think of it on the inside, but you are seen as white. And with that goes built-in privileges that we're not always aware of, but they're there.
Yeah.
To comment on what Ron said about the Roman philosopher about logic versus emotion. The preacher that married Jane and me, in speaking to a youth class, he said, whenever you have a contest between your emotions and logic, always follow the logic because the emotion will betray you. I thought that was good advice.
Way to say it. Okay.
I have
Jim Vandermiller, last comment.
Did you call me?
Yes, Jim, go ahead. Last comment.
I feel like I'm talking too much, but I still feel that one comment is necessary for all of us Methodists. In going through the litany of all the things that were in the news, one thing was decidedly missing, and that was that this time, last year, we were all very, very concerned and high on our list of priorities of worries that we were clicking our worry beads on was what was going to happen to the Methodist Church.
Yes.
And somehow that has just fallen off the table, just totally off the table. And I think that's part and parcel of what's going on with a lot of this racial and divisiveness, is that we have just allowed this issue, which I think is extremely important, to disappear from our conversation. So I just wanted to raise, I'd love to know what the heck's gonna happen.
Yeah. Good point.
You
Jim.
should
Well,
go
we
to
all-
the Sky Mountain webpage. And the bishop has responded, and all that is what's happening. Go to Sky Mountain, our conference webpage, and it'll explain everything, Jim.
Good idea. Okay, Jim, that's a good reminder. Thank you. We were deep into that conversation 1 year ago. That's right. And it was all put on hold. Thank you, everybody, for a good discussion today. Let's keep this world in our prayers and hope next year is a better year for all of us.
Amen.
Thank you, Lord, for all
Thank
our
you.
blessings.
Amen.
Thank you for all being with us today. Take care.
Happy New Year.
Bye.
Happy
Thank
New
you.
Year.
Bye.
Bye-bye.